In March 2022, researchers made a scientific breakthrough and quietly published a paper associated with the neuroscience of friendship. They found that friendship primarily has to do with the activation of the ventral striatum and nucleus accumbens, meaning that friendship is primarily associated with decision-making and pleasure. They also found that if you sneeze and fart at the same time, your body takes a screenshot. If you know anything about making friends and building lasting relationships, you'd know that it's much more complex than a few regions of the brain. You'd also know that for some, making friends is about as difficult as a sloth on Vicodin foot racing Seabiscuit. In my opinion, there's 3 phases of friendlessness. Phase 1, I don't need friends anyway. Phase 2, okay, I'm not saying I need friends, but someone to grab a beer with would kind of be cool, I guess. Phase 3, am I autistic? With more and more people self-identifying as being on the spectrum, and with boys being 4 times more likely than girls to have autism, these 3 phases may not be as funny or offensive as you might think, but perhaps more a reality than not. The truth is, if you have no friends in your life, your body gets into what I call existential stressor mode. It reacts the same as consuming several packs of cigarette a day. Having no friends increases your chances of heart attack and stroke by 50%, dramatically increases your likelihood for depression, increases your chances of all-cause death by 30% in your 60s. It's also the case that having friends increases your endorphins, which acts as the body's immune system and fights bacteria and viruses. In essence, more friends makes you more formidable. To be formidable means to give life a fighting chance with the best attitude and best tools at your disposal. And if I could pick the single most important tool for living a formidable life, I would say friendship, and more specifically brotherhood, is the single most important tool to living a powerful and fulfilling life. Life has infinite dimensions. It's an infinite boundary of more dimensions than we can possibly comprehend, and yet, even more confusing than life itself is a single, solitary human being. Our time as a species has far mastered its environment, the universe, mathematics, artificial life, and yet, we have hardly scratched the surface of human consciousness, and especially the consciousness of others while in their very company. With all of our extravagant gadgetry, we are all still chimps. Chimps whose thumbs, eyes, and attention are seemingly being used less and less for handshakes and more for iPhones and likes. And yes, that includes myself, since I'm, in part, making this video hoping it goes viral. Essentially, we're just chimps trying to understand higher dimensional beings all around us. And sometimes, this can feel lonely. When we're ostracized from these higher dimensional beings we call friends, or when we see a cluster of stars we so desperately want to orbit around, we simple men can sometimes feel out of orbit. And yet, the one fundamental force us monkeys have to communicate with these greater dimensional creatures we call friends is gravity. The kind of gravity I'm talking about is the gravity that means seriousness and gravitas, the kind that means falling into someone the heavier things get. An example is Alfred Lanzig's Endurance, where a group of men voyaged across the world in hopes to become history's first crew to expedition across Antarctica. Even though the crew were faced with being pulled into the sub-zero sea, scurvy, severe starvation and thirst, marauders, polar bears, frostbite, pneumonia, etc., each and every one of its members survived. They knew the situation they were in and knew that the only way to make it out alive was to take serious care of each other. When a man spilled his entire cup of warm water, each man would volunteer their drink to fill the empty cup. When morale was low, the leader created plays to keep their spirits lifted. They played card games, with one sailor in particular writing in his diary, Hurley and Boss played religiously a set of 6 games of poker every afternoon. I think each rather regards it a duty. They celebrated Christmas, played hockey, sang together, and much more. The point is, to be a good friend is to master closeness with a sense of lightheartedness, but more than anything, a sense of unashamed devotion. If you read Endurance, what you'll also notice is how the writer beautifully captures the honesty of each man in the face of seemingly certain death. That brings me to another prerequisite of true friendship: authenticity. I have this quote that I'm going to make into a video someday, and it's the idea that the less you are original, the closer you are to no one. When you have friends who are multidimensional, you yourself become multidimensional. To test this, I have this thought experiment. I call it the barren existence test. If you asked your friend about a random mainstream issue, say abortion or chain restaurants or even favorite color, and recorded her answer, would she give the same answer if you replaced her brain with someone else's similar in age? Would you even notice that it's someone else occupying your friend's thoughts, opinions, and beliefs? If the answer is yes, you are dealing with someone who is barren and has no existence, meaning you are dealing with someone who is single-dimensional. If the answer is no, on the other hand, if you feel like a brain swap in a totally original and authentic friend would actually make you miss her, well then, my friend, you have a truly unique tesseract in your midst, and she must be treasured, because there aren't many original people out there anymore. The reason for this is because the things that make us unique are being chipped away by sensational politics and cultural expectations, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. This is why what I've called gravity is so important. Without the ability to sink into one another and look for what makes them unique, we cannot be multidimensional or original. And if there's one mortal sin as a unique human being, it's to be a barren, inauthentic essence, a copy-paste being easily replaced without anyone even noticing that the original you was missing. Because much like all the big gods before you, you only exist in so much as others know you exist. The tricky thing is, however, someone must know you, the naked you, the you with a capital Y that transcends mere politics, cultural expectations, and in-group conformity. What I mean to say here can be boiled down into a single quote. If everyone is thinking the same thing, no one is thinking. If we are to be multifaceted, we have to be unafraid in expressing our differences. And this is why we need to expand our awareness of what's generic and what's genuine. And in my opinion, the only way we can discover uniqueness in the wild is by expanding our friendship circle. And to all the singles out there, it seems that a wider friendship circle just might have greater success than a romance first approach, meaning it might be possible that being quote-unquote friend-zoned is more successful to finding a long-term significant other than quote-unquote looking for that spark. In a paper published in 2021, when nearly 2,000 people were asked to state their preference for romantic relationships, more than 65% said they would prefer a friendship-first approach. Funny enough, it also looks like the added benefit to having a large social circle isn't just the preferred friends to lovers pathway, but the fact that the second best way to a romantic partner is through mutual friends. To put it bluntly, if you want a girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, friend with benefit, husband, wife, whatever, focus on having more friends. In our insignificant existence as three-dimensional species amidst infinitely complex and conscious dimensions, we find ourselves almost always lost in space. But sooner or later, we have to realize that the only way we can understand ourselves and the people around us is by falling into each other without judgment. To look at each other with eyes not of generic interest, but with eyes that say, "I see you." To put it in much more beautiful terms than I ever could, Irish essayist and poet David Whyte describes friendship as the following: "The ultimate touchstone of friendship is witness, the privilege of having been seen by someone and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another, to have walked with them, to have believed in them, and sometimes just to have accompanied them for however brief a span on a journey impossible to accomplish alone. Thank you for watching.